Effects of visual pollution. What is visual pollution? Visual pollution can be defined as a natural or artificial change in the environment that creates visual clutter and makes it difficult to see. Visual pollution can also refer to an increase in signs and symbols in our everyday lives. This blog post will discuss effects of visual pollution on society, with examples of its adverse effects on health, safety, and aesthetics. Effects of visual pollution on human health. Visual pollution causes an increase in the prevalence of health problems. The sun's brightness can cause headaches, fatigue, and nausea to those who are sensitive or have pre-existing eye conditions like macular degeneration. In a digital world where we constantly stare at screens for hours on end, it is vital that our eyes get time away from bright light sources such as electronic devices. It has been shown by researchers that after 10 minutes without looking directly into any visual device, computer monitors, there was significant improvement with vision performance when their next task began 3 days later due to a reduction in disease burden. Visual pollution has been shown to have adverse effects on human health. One study found that people who spend their lives in urban areas are more likely to suffer from depression, autism, and ADHD than those of us living outside the city with less visual stimuli. Effects of visual pollution on ecosystem. Visual pollution is a must for any spectacular night sky. Light pollution casts dark shadows and blocks out the stars from our eyesight, leading to an unappealing sight that has negative consequences on animal habitats and ecosystems. Lighting up your neighborhood with bright lights can have adverse effects on animals in their natural habitat as well as other aspects of nature such as plant life or marine life forms like plankton at bay near shorelines where light waves are more concentrated than anywhere else. Visual pollution caused by humans has an adverse effect on the natural environment. In fact, it is often a leading cause of species extinction and global warming. For example, as we continue to cut down trees for lumber or use them as fuel in our furnaces for heat and electricity production, many animals are losing their homes and food sources that they need in order to survive while levels of carbon dioxide rise dramatically into the atmosphere because these trees once absorbed CO2 from the air when they were alive before being harvested. Effects of visual pollution on animals. Researchers have found that animals might see pollution in a different way than humans do. Studies show that many animal species are sensitive to visual cues and interpret the presence of artificial light as an indicator for potential food sources or mates, even if they don't understand what it is exactly. This means potentially more pollution-related deaths among these vulnerable creatures when human-made lighting causes them to venture into dangerous areas with a bit of warning like roadsides. Scientists are working to find out the effects of visual pollution on animals. In recent years, scientists have begun looking into how screens and artificial light affect animal behavior with a focus on whether these distractions might somehow be related to the rise in depression cases among humans. It is suspected that constant exposure could lead some wildlife species toward extinction by making it difficult for them to survive their own natural cycles like migration or hunting at night when they're usually active, at least until we end up getting hit head-on by one during our drive home from work late at night because its eyesight has been impaired over time due to screen glare. Some birds have already seen this happen, as many nocturnal migrating songbirds seem especially drawn towards illuminated buildings where they fall prey. Effects of visual pollution on plants. Visual pollution has been shown to impact the health of plants negatively. The detrimental effects of visual pollutants on plant life have long since been established, with such issues as brightness and hues proving particularly damaging for photosynthesis. The effects of visual pollution on plants are not well known, but it may be happening. Many people are unaware of how much visual pollution can have a negative effect on plants. Leaves that grow too close to the ground often get scorched by sunlight, and this increases plant mortality rates for nearby vegetation. Even in shady areas where leaves should be able to avoid direct sun exposure, they will still heat up due to light diffusion from other sources like windows or street lamps at night time, causing them harm as well. In order to save not only our eyes but also our surroundings, we must use natural materials with delicate textures when designing landscapes instead of relying solely on hardscapes such as concrete, which absorbs all incoming energy, including any solar radiation it may receive during daylight hours. Meaning less is reflected back out into the environment around us, potentially leading more harmful effects. Effects of visual pollution. Effects of visual pollution on aquatic life. Visual pollution is a severe threat to aquatic life. The ever-increasing amounts of artificial light pouring into the atmosphere have been projected by some experts as one of the leading causes for environmental degradation in coastal areas and waterways around major cities like New York City, Seattle, Hong Kong, or Sydney. where the water reflects most any type of ambient illumination that's cast on it from anywhere nearby. It can lead to disruptions in natural cycles such as the breeding season, which then impacts populations negatively. Artificial lighting often disrupts animal behavior patterns through disruption with their circadian rhythms, which also leads to the overall deterioration of ecological systems broken down because animals want these certain conditions at all times for reproduction purposes, so if they don't get them, you'll see fewer births happening over time. Effects of visual pollution on agriculture. Visual pollution does not just negatively impact the environment, it affects agriculture. The National Academy of Sciences found that light from artificial sources has been changing both agricultural practices and native ecosystems for millennia, which means there is an urgent need to study how we can mitigate its adverse effects on these areas while also taking advantage of any positive impacts such as increased yields or earlier planting seasons. Visual pollution is not only an eyesore but also has been shown to affect agricultural production. Visual pollution can be seen as a form of land degradation that affects the quality and quantity of crops by interfering with plant growth cycles through soil infertility or acidification. Effects of visual pollution on the economy. Visual pollution is an economic issue that has been overlooked for the last few decades. In recent years, it's become apparent how much visual toll pollution takes on local economies and tourism. Visual pollution can be seen as something like air or water. It exists in our daily lives without us really thinking about its effects too profoundly because we are so used to seeing these types of sights every day. But when you take into account all the ways visual pollution affects people, communities, and industries throughout one country on a large scale from mental health to finances, its negative impacts seem unimaginable until they're right in front of your eyes. The current and constantly growing problem with visual pollution is becoming a significant issue for both locals and tourists alike in many parts of Asia, as well as some other developing countries around the world. The most apparent symptoms are clouds or smog from air pollutants that block out natural sunlight to cause an artificial sky glow at night, which can make stars invisible to those living under it.